Alright, and welcome back. In this video, we are going to be going through Chapter 9, Section 6, titled Other Angles. By the end of this video, we should be able to solve problems involving angles formed by chords, secants, and tangents. So please have out your guide and notes, and let's begin. So the measure of an angle formed by two chords that intersect inside of a circle is equal to half the sum of the measures of the intercepted arcs. So if chords WX and YZ intersect inside of a circle, then the measure of angle 1 is going to be equal to half the measure of arc WY and measure of arc XZ. So if we are looking at this here, again, we have chord WX and we have chord YZ. So half the measure of WY and plus measure of XZ. So in example number one, we are given if the measure of arc PQ is equal to 45, the measure of arc RS is equal to 75, we want to find the measure of angle 1. And then if the measure of angle 1 is equal to 55, and the measure of arc RS is equal to 80, we want to find the measure of arc PQ. So for number 1, the measure of angle 1 is going to be half the sum of the arc's measure of RS plus the measure of arc PQ. Well, we know that the measure of arc RS is 75. We know the measure of arc PQ is going to be 45. So half of that gives us 60. And likewise for part B, the measure of angle 1 is equal to half, again, of the same sum. Well, we know the measure of angle 1 is equal to 55. Well, we take half of the sum of measure of arc RS, which is 80, plus the measure of arc PQ, which we don't know yet. We can multiply both sides by 2. Thus, we get 110 is equal to 80 plus the measure of arc PQ, and we get that 30 is equal to the measure of arc PQ. With this in mind, please work on problems 1 through 4 on the guided notes and resume when you're ready to move forward. So the measure of an angle formed by two secants, two tangents, or a secant and a tangent drawn from a point outside of the circle is equal to half the difference of the measures of the intercepted arcs. And we have two different examples here. So in example number 2, if the measure of arc DC is equal to 100 and the measure of arc EB is equal to 40, we want to find the measure of angle A. In order for us to do that, we know that the measure of angle A is going to be half the difference of our bigger arc, so arc DC, and the measure of our smaller arc, arc EB. So we're going to take 100, we're going to take away 40 from it and cut it in half, and we're going to get 30. Likewise, for example number 3, if we know that the measure of angle W is 65, so the angle is outside of our circle, and the arc measure of XZ is equal to 70, we want to find the measure of our major arc XVY. So in the way that we're going to do it, we're going to set it up exactly as we did before. The measure of angle W is going to be half of the difference between our major arc minus our minor arc, our biggest arc minus our smallest valued arc. And we're going to fill in from there. We know our measure of angle W is 65. Then that's going to be equal to half of our major arc minus our minor arc. We then are going to multiply both sides by 2. We're going to get 130 is equal to our major arc minus the measure of our minor arc. So we add 70 to both sides, and we end up with 200 degrees is the measure of arc XVW. Lastly, for example number 4, if the measure of arc QRS is equal to 240, we want to find the measure of arc QS and the measure of angle P. So we can add those two arcs together, and that's going to equal 360 degrees, since those two arcs create the circle. So now we know that 240 is the measure of arc QRS, and we want to find the measure of arc QS. So we subtract 240 on both sides, we get the measure of arc QS is 120. Knowing this, and that we have a major arc and a minor arc, and our angle is outside of our circle, we can set up knowing that the measure of angle P, the angle outside of our circle, is going to be equal to half of the difference between the two. So we have 1/2 is going to be equal to 240, now minus 120, which is 60, which is going to be our answer. With this in mind, please work on problems 5 through 8 on the guided notes and resume when you're ready to move forward in a summary. So measures of angles formed by radii, chords, tangents, and secants. So if the vertex is at the center of the circle, then the measure of the central angle is equal to the measure of the intercepted arc. So the measure of angle 1 is going to be equal to x. If the vertex is going to be on the circle, then the measure of the angle is equal to half the measure of the intercepted arc. So the measure of angle 2 is going to be equal to 1/2 the measure of angle x. If the vertex is inside but not at the center of the circle, then the measure of the angle is half the sum of the intercepted arcs. So the measure of angle 3 is going to be equal to half the sum of angle x plus y, or arc x plus y, pardon me. And if the vertex is outside the circle, then the measure of the angle is half the difference of the intercepted arcs. So measure of angle 4, again, that's going to be outside of our circle. It's going to be equal to half the difference of our two arcs, so x minus y. With this in mind, please work on problems 9 through 18 on the guided notes. Keep up the great work. Keep making yourself proud. Let us know if you have any questions, and we'll talk to you soon.